Whether you're conquering professional exams or personal milestones, we welcome you to Beyond Clean's Confidence Certification, the 52-week test prep podcast series. With expert insights, actionable tips, and engaging discussions, we'll break down the toughest concepts in sterile processing and build your confidence every step of the way. Join host Sarah B. Cruz as she embarks on a mission to help you not just prep for tests, but craft your success story. And now your host, Sarah B. Cruz.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to Confidence Certification, a 52-week test prep podcast series to equip you to take your sterile processing career to the next level. I'm your host, Sarah B. Cruz, and on this episode, we are going to be extending the conversation that we just had last week. So if you didn't listen to last week's kind of panel discussion that we had, I'm going to ask you to put a pin in this and go back and take a listen. Because in that episode, we talked about what it's like to be in a sterile processing program. And to speak on that, we've got Bobby back with us today. Hey, Bobby.
Hey, Sarah. Thanks for having me back. I am excited to talk about this particular topic, the self-study journey. Even though that panel discussion was great, and I love what those folks are doing, in my region of the country, there wasn't, and I don't think there still isn't, a sterile processing program even available to technicians. And so the self-study, unless you're going to do a virtual school, the self-study is really where people are having to make it happen. And that was kind of my story as well. And so I'm excited about talking through this to help out those people along the way who maybe aren't able to participate in some of those really formal education.
Oh, totally. And I couldn't agree more. When I went to sterile processing school, I feel like we're dating ourselves. When we went to sterile processing schools, now, there was only one program of reputable stature in my state. Now, I say reputable stature because, like the reasons we pointed out in the last episode, the quality of curriculum, the urgency that the instructors give you, and the sincerity in their curriculum really varies all over the place when you look at the availability of sterile processing programs. So I only had one school in my state that I believed held up to the standards that would help me meet that. And there weren't virtual classrooms available. There weren't self-paced. There might have been self-paced available. I wasn't finding them, though. I only found that one, right? Because I needed to be in a brick or mortar building anyways. So it's interesting hearing that point when you're saying I didn't even have something like that available in my space. So that's very interesting, Bobby.
Well, the good news, it's not game over in that situation, right? As we've been saying throughout all of this season, there is a whole industry of technicians and educators that want to see technicians succeed and grow. And so getting involved and getting connected, both through this podcast and just the industry at large, as you kind of make your own way through self-study and that path and that journey, it's totally doable. It can definitely be. There's a whole community of people doing it. And so let's dive into that a little bit. Sarah, you mentioned that you needed that brick and mortar situation. Tell me a little bit more about that. Like, why was that particularly life-giving to you? And maybe if you were to do it all over again, would you do anything different?
Yeah, I think the age of COVID has taught me that I can do things virtually and then still stick to my time-bound promises. The power of T with your manageability, right? So we talked about in previous episodes. But at that time, I needed a brick and mortar school because it made me accountable. And there was something very promising about being in a formal education setting. I showed up. They had a syllabus, they had a curriculum, they told me what I was going to learn, and I tried real hard to learn it. Versus my self-study journey for all the other letters after my name, which pretty much just mean I'm a nerd, right? So all the rest of the letters after my name were a self-study journey because there aren't or weren't any formal programs available for the additional certifications. So in this approach is informal education. An informal education is kind of like a grab and go, bits and pieces, and learning as you need on the go. It doesn't necessarily have that established structure that a formal education or an institute program provides you. So the nice thing about an informal education is that it can be supplemented by the formal education's resources like our textbooks, the manual. But then, of course, you can pull in informal resources like social media, networking, your own made flashcards. Unless you're in a program that makes the flashcards for you, you're probably going to make the flashcards on your own. So self-study journey is really an informal education supported by formal tools.
That makes a lot of sense. And what I love about our two stories is that if that formal education, that brick and mortar school with a pre-set out syllabus and a study guide that comes along with it isn't available, it's not game over, right? There's a whole industry out there, as we've been saying all season long, that wants to see sterile processing technicians succeed and grow. And so there are a lot of opportunities for partnership, accountability, mentorship, and some help in this self-study journey. And you had the opportunity to do both. You did the school for CRCST and then self-study for the others. So I'm curious to dig into a little bit more of kind of some of the differences that you saw between those and your success in the informal education. Just to nerd out a little bit more with you on definitions and terms, you brought up the term informal education as opposed to formal education. What do you mean by informal education? Is that like studying with a beanie hat on and like a clown? I don't know. I know that's not what it means, but tell me what you mean by informal education and what that has to do with self-study.
Sure. So remember, self-study is a type of customized learning based on the individual, right? So when you go to not to use the word in the sentence, but when you go to a formal institution, that means somebody has decided what you're going to study, when you're going to study it, how much of it you need to study, and what you're going to be tested on. That's very formal. When we think of any school we've ever went to that we had to get on a bus to or walk a mile in the snow uphill to get to, that's formal education. Whereas the informal aspect is us determining what we need to study based on our own knowledge and taking into consideration what we may already know. Remember, be gentle with that phrase, all right? Well, just because we think we know it doesn't mean we know everything, yeah? And then taking what we need to know and determining what we are going to study first. So you don't necessarily need to take that decontamination chapter weeks into your study. You could study decontamination now. You can study decontamination while you're in decon, and then go home and read the chapter after it. That's informal. If you did that while you were in a formal program and then you got a test on sterilization and you're reading the decon chapter, you're not going to pass that test. Okay. But in that space, informal study really gives us this way of making it unique to ourselves. It lets us take our study styles even more so and apply them in the way that we need. And it typically occurs outside that traditional lecture school-based learning system.
So our folks doing the self-study in some ways have a leg up, right? And as I'm going to try to work into this conversation, I think there's nothing more valuable than being able to pair up, like we talked about a few episodes ago, your education and your training of being able to take deeper dives on things that you're actively doing in the department. So like you said, saving those decontamination chapters for when you're in there learning decontamination. So there are certainly some extra opportunities you have if you're not tied to a particular syllabus or a particular training program. But what you lose in that is some of the accountability that comes, we've talked about that syllabus shock in college of whenever that's plopped in your lap of everything that needs to get done. It kind of forces you to pull out the calendar and pencil in when everything's going to get done. Whereas the informal study can sometimes turn into no study of just deciding, maybe I'll get to this someday. So how did you, in those self-study journeys of your additional certifications, how did you make sure that there was some kind of formal structure that you made yourself to keep you on track? Yeah,
sure. And just to be clear, any time there was a chance for me to take a formal education route, I did. So I went to school for sterile processing to get my CSPDT, which is through the CBSPD. And I went through a program, this one was online, for my CRCST, which is offered by the HSPA. So me personally, I'm always going to choose a formal route first. It's because the other programs weren't available for my CIS and CHL that I went the informal route. So because I did that, I was able to almost copy and paste the study outline or the syllabus or the curriculum and apply it to these other areas. So I was able to break down the different chapters for CIS in the way that a program instructor or your teacher does for you, which is another benefit of the formal education that I just want to touch on. Formal education really allows you to lend your needs to a professional that has experience with them, technically speaking. So it's under the assumption that these instructors have industry expertise. They have knowledge. They've probably been in sterile processing before, or they're in some type of healthcare facility. There's some programs that are run by nurses. With that being said, they're lending their professional integrity to help guide you with what they believe will be on the test, because they don't know either. It's not like the HSPA and the CBSPD reach out to them and say, okay, this is what's going to be on the test. Make your slide deck accordingly. These professionals, and myself included as someone who teaches sterile processing, is reviewing the information, looking at the percentages of the tests that are available to study for, and making that curriculum. So I wanted to make sure that I shared that I've been in formal programs, I've copied and pasted, and then as someone who became an instructor after all of that, I was able to push and pull all of that ability to make a study outline.
So what Sarah and I are going to try to do for you today is synthesize some of that, because we all aren't, sterile processing program educators and writers like Sarah is. So how do you go about building your own curriculum and building your own outline? But before we jump into that, Sarah, what do you say we take a break?
Sounds good. How about a mid-session confidence boost? It's time for our mid-episode confidence boost, where we focus on a key sterile processing test concept. Now, there's no guarantee these concepts will be on the test that you take, but they are key concepts to the workplace and are discussed in the literature. Today, we'll cover modes of transmission. Modes of transmission are the ways in which microbials and microorganisms spread. The modes of transmission vary by the type of organisms, and some infectious agents can be transmitted by more than one route. The 5 most common modes include contact. This is the most common mode of disease-causing organisms transmission. There's direct contact, which requires physical contact between a source of infection and the susceptible host. And then there's indirect contact, when the disease-causing agent is transmitted from its reservoir to a susceptible host by means of inanimate objects, also known as fomites. Then you have your droplet transmission, a form of contact transmission. The microorganism is released in the air when coughing, sneezing, laughing, or talking. It can typically travel up to 3 feet or 1 meter. Then there's airborne routes. This requires use of special air handling and ventilation systems, as it can disperse and travel a far distance. Then there's vehicle transmission. This refers to the transmission of disease agents by media such as water, food, and air. And don't forget about dust particles. Dust particles can harbor various pathogens. Lastly, we have our vector transmission. Vectors are living things that cause disease, like insects, especially mosquitoes, fleas, lice, mites, ticks, just to name a few. Learning the inner workings of microorganisms and how they exist, their composition, and how they spread is vital to ultimately knowing how to destroy them. And that's what we do as sterile processing professionals. That's going to wrap this week's mid-session confidence boost. Good luck.
All right, welcome back. As Sarah and I have been discussing the self-study journey, how to make your own way. You may be one of those technicians out there that the only option that you have, or maybe the one that you would prefer to have, is to prepare for your certification on your own outside of a formal education program. And Sarah teased going through the process of building her own curriculum based on her experience with other programs and formal education, kind of copying that style and creating an outline for herself in studying. Sarah, I want to hear a lot more about that. Can you tell us a little bit about that process of building an outline for yourself as you prepare to study for an exam?
Yeah, sure. And I think it's going to be important that we recognize that this is a study outline, okay? And the nice thing about a self-study journey is that it's based on you. So the first 13 episodes of Confident Certification are all about how you study. Okay. So please, I'm not going to say re-listen to 1 through 13, but there are some key episodes that you should revisit because we'll apply them in our outline. Because like we pointed out with the formal education, this isn't just some canned syllabus that we're going to kick your way and you're just going to get through it on the struggle bus or thrive on it. Yeah. So the first step in creating your own curriculum is understanding that it's a study outline. All right. This is going to be a routine, not a schedule. That's the difference between a syllabus and an outline. All right. Routines are meant to be flexible. You do the best you can. You take life considerations into it. Whereas a schedule, if you don't show up to that class, you're not going to get credit for that class. If you don't take that test, you're going to fail that test. Sometimes you take the test and you fail it anyways. You know what I mean? So I digress. So making sure we understand a curriculum is a routine and not a schedule is the first piece of grace we need to take into consideration. All right. Now, when we actually get out of the philosophical and we start building the outline, consider how you take notes first. I personally like to do like the Roman numeral style where I'll do 1A, 1. So they're all very structured notes because I am a reader, writer, learner. You know, maybe you're the type of person that needs to make flashcards. So understanding how you're going to study will be a big way in making your study outline. Okay. So you could be like Bobby and start with the chapter you want to learn about the least. What was the phrase you said, Bobby? Eat the frog?
Eat the frog first, yeah. If you've got a frog on your dinner plate, don't save it for the worst. So yeah, if you're in decontamination and like that decontamination chapter is pretty intimidating when you consider the disinfection chapter that goes along with it and the cleaning chapter, there's a lot to learn about decontamination. So yeah, if I had something hard like that in front of me, I would want to eat that one first.
Right. So maybe you start with the hardest chapter first. So on your outline, you take and you write decontamination. A big thing that these certification bodies do offer that is general knowledge, public knowledge, is that they give you percentages of what to study and how much may be on your certification test. Okay. So you go to your study source, who you're going to get certified through. It does, whatever you pick. Look at the decontamination section and look at all the they literally outline what you need to study. Okay. Now, granted, these are very broad and high level concepts. Okay. But starting there and then listing the different items you need to learn or making the flashcards according to each line item. That's going to be huge on your study outline. So if you want to start with the hard stuff first, that's great. Maybe you warm up with a little biology. I don't know anybody that warms up with biology, but I didn't mind learning biology. The regulations chapter really got me. Really taking that into consideration and looking at that sheet that's provided by these certification and association bodies. They're giving you what you need. Yeah.
That sounds a little bit like a cheat code, Sarah, but I can back you up on it. That is definitely a resource that's available out there. So what I think we should do is try to pull those and include them in our session description, eh? So take a look in the session description for this episode, and we will try to link you to some of those resources so that you can take a look at whichever exam it is that you have in front of you. You should be able to take a look at what types of topics are going to be on there. Now, certainly there won't be questions on there, but like Sarah said, there should be some percentage percentages of topics that you need to know information about to succeed in your exam. So we'll put that out for you. There are a lot of study methods out there, Sarah. So beyond that initial Roman numeral outline of, pacing myself through the chapter and what I'm going to study, and maybe having that resource in the other hand and deciding what am I going to put on my outline and where I'm going to put the lion's share of my focus so that I can succeed on the exam. Are there any other things that you would add, or maybe that next step for building your curriculum and your outline of how I'm going to study through this Roman numeral outline that I've just put together?
Oh, yeah, sure. So that's where your supporting tools come in. And this is actually something that a lot of the sterile processing instructors supplement their learning with. Okay. So me personally, when I'm teaching, I will pause after big concepts and grab a video. And then say, okay, cool. So I explained how to don and doff. Let me show you how to don and doff, right? Or you could visit a mid-session confidence boost. We talked about donning and doffing PPEs a couple of episodes back. So making sure that you've outlined what you need and then finding the supporting evidence for your learning style is going to be big with it. So for example, if you are a flashcard person, you've got the book. You've got the suggested areas in which you should spend your time based on the percentages provided by the different organizations and associations. Then you go into the areas, and so you're learning decontamination, and they just got to environmental detergents. There's a billion environmental detergents, okay? And some of them shouldn't be in the facility. But maybe as you're going through and you're giving you the definitions, now you're making the flashcards with them instead of writing them down. Right. So that's another tool in which you can use, is really understanding how you're going to apply it and put it in that space. And that's what the sterile processing instructors will do for you. And that's a big part of why self-study journey kind of just becomes this free for all that everybody just thinks I'll read the book on my own and I'll get it. That's not what these program instructors do, as we learned from last week. And even from Bobby, who was talking about the benefits of incorporating the learning and the training while you're in the department.
Sarah, you mentioned the flashcards, and rather than trying to build those all on the front end, or maybe only grabbing the ones in the back, building them as you go. I'm just thinking about how that might have worked out for me. I tend to be a highlighter, and those types of folks that whenever you're done with the book, you look back and there's more things highlighted than aren't highlighted. It's like maybe the important things are the ones that didn't get highlighted. I think if I had done the flashcard as you go method, I probably would have ended up with 700 flashcards or something, just this onerous stack to carry around. It's like, Bobby, what do you have with you at your workstation? Oh, nothing. That's just my that's just my flashcard stack. So
my sterile processing book flashcards.
That's right. But no, that's wise. Having a set of tools that you want to use as you go through your outline and study together. And as Sarah said, I was going to talk about, and as I said, I was going to talk about figuring out how to incorporate that learning into your day-to-day practice. It's going to make you a better technician if you understand the why of decontamination while you're scrubbing instruments at that decontamination sink. It's also going to help you ask better questions to your preceptor. It'll help your department in the long run. And it kind of creates a built-in outline for you in a way. If your department has a structured training program, just at the outset of that, decide, I'm going to do like the heavy studying, or maybe the really focused studying, and go back and do tools later. But just, I'm in decontamination for the next week. In the evenings this week, I want to read the chapter as an introduction. There's no way you get to the end of 90 days and having, read most of the book once and gone through your 90 days that you're just ready to test. I say no way. Maybe some of you out there could do that, but that's a lot to take in. I don't know about you, but when I went through orientation, I felt like I was drinking through a fire hose. So you're telling me to stack certification study prep on top of that. But just as some initial exposure to that industry-wide education to give some more context to your training, really, really valuable in that self-study journey. And then after you get through that, you can go back and revisit some of those topics and do more of your flashcard, highlight everything kind of studying to make sure that you've got the particulars down that you'll need for your exam. I don't know. I think that would be a wise way to go about it.
Sure. And, the helping tool that these associations and organizations provide, they have a purpose, so they help you understand what's relevant. And that's a big part with the over highlighting or the excessive flashcards, is when you don't know, you think everything's important. And I'm not saying not everything's important, but they're telling you the main areas that you should focus in, and that's what makes it relevant. Now, I doubt that they're going to create these textbooks and have a tremendous amount of information that isn't important in it, but it's understanding the nitty-gritty of the key areas that makes the difference. And that's a big part that I focus on as someone who makes sterile processing curriculum for the program I teach, is I'm not going to oversaturate individuals with all the knowledge. I'm going to give them all the information, but I'm going to make sure that I'm relaying to them what's relevant. And we can do that in our self-study journey with an effective study outline. And of course, by setting your SMART goals or your SMARTer goals. And we did talk about that a couple of episodes back. And a big part of that is realizing your limitations and your non-negotiables. I mean, I got non-negotiables. I am not going to miss Monday Night Football, ever. Ever. It's never going to happen. I'm going to watch it. And you bet I'm going to block out 8 hours on Sunday to watch Sunday football, right? Even though my team is terrible. But what are you going to do? There's even more serious negotiables, though. You may have family, right? You have to make sure you drop your kids off at school. These are all things that you can take into consideration with your self-study journey that brick and mortars do not permit.
I appreciate you bringing that up, because it's like that syllabus shock that we talked about at the beginning, except we're doing it to ourselves. Nothing is more stressful than when you sit down, particularly at the outset of your training, with this big book and all these dreams and aspirations, and figuring out how in the world am I going to study through this. Or maybe it's not stressful and you just have that eager anticipation of, I'm going to crush this, and you chart a course for yourself that's just not realistic. And so bringing those SMART goals into the self-study journey are probably one of the most important things you can do to succeed.
100%. And what would confidence certification be if we didn't offer a well-rounded scope of study opportunity and options? We can't just sit here and talk about why self-study is important, or saying that a sterile processing program is more important than informal education, or even to tell you what type of certification test you should go for, what program you should take. That's not our role in confidence certification. Our goal is to make sure that we're providing you with all the information and all the knowledge from ourselves, our industry experts, and of course our work BFF Bobby, so that you can decide what's best for you. So as we wrap this episode, let's give a little bit of homework, I think it's going to be important that you go around and make a list of your formal education resources and your informal opportunities. Okay, you can make them little columns if you need to, again, or you can just make a mental note. This is going to help, because if you make a list of them, especially if you make the column, you'll be able to draw lines to your formal resources to all of your informal opportunities. So as we wrap this episode, go ahead and make a list of your informal and your formal resources and start to connect how they can support each other to construct your own curriculum accountability through your study item. And don't forget to come back next week when we talk about what to do outside of the classroom and when you get into the department and how to make your internship hours count. Bobby, thanks for hanging out with us again today.
Thanks, Sarah. That was a good one.
And that's going to do it for this week's episode. For more sterile processing education and resources, make sure to visit beyondclean.net or follow Beyond Clean on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't forget to check out over 1,000 SPD-related videos at youtube.com/beyondclean. If you have any questions or comments for the show, you can reach out to info@beyondclean.net. Finally, make sure to download the Beyond Clean mobile app on the Apple and Android app stores so that you don't miss a future episode of any of the other awesome Beyond Clean podcasts. My name is Sarah B. Cruz, and you've been listening to Confidence Certification. Until next time, keep fighting dirty and pass that test with confidence.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast series are of Sarah B. Cruz only and do not represent the companies she works for or collaborates with.